Okay, guys, we are going to continue the lecture on Bootstrap with two PowerPoints, one on nav bars, one on Jumbotrons, and these. Hopefully, you're kind of getting the feel for Bootstrap and how to work with Bootstrap. It's all about learning the classes, the Bootstrap classes, and you add the Bootstrap classes, which give you the functionality and the style, right? So the content is still in the HTML, but by adding classes, you get your site to look a certain way and behave a certain way. So the Bootstrap Nav Bar, um, is great because it's mobile responsive. So we get a mobile responsive nav bar. They kind of support for branding. Obviously, the branding is the logo. So you kind of have built-in support for a logo. Clearly, we've got some navigation and mobile responsive navigation, and including support for a collapse plugin. And that's just what you see when you minimize it. It collapses into what I call the Hamburger Menu, right? So there's some built-in JavaScript, this collapse plugin, that when you link to that JavaScript library, you get that behavior automatically. And so when we look at a nav bar, there is the class navbar, .navbar. That's a very important parent. That's why it says it's a wrapping element. It's a parent element. So a parent navbar element. And then there's also the navbar expand at a breakpoint for responsive collapsing. And so we're going to look at the difference between just having navbar expand and navbar expand at a breakpoint. We're going to code up a couple quick examples, as well as color schemes, light and dark and various colors and all that kind of fun stuff. Navbar contents are fluid by default, but they can also be fluid, meaning responsive. They resize in a fluid nature. But we can also code them more statically. So we'll take a look at what a static navbar would look like. You can use, for more control over your navbar, you can use Flexbox. So use display flex and really control the spacing of the links. Right? So if you want a good control of the links on your nav bar, we have to apply what we've learned about Flexbox in our nav bar. Okay, because in the rest of the page, we can use the grid system kind of by default. And once we kind of learned the grid system yesterday and hopefully done a couple labs, you feel comfortable with the grid system. But in a nav bar, we're not going to put a grid system in a nav bar. Instead, we're just going to use the display flex and all of the spacing that we learned there. So I'm going to go ahead and code up this simple static nav bar as a demonstration. And so this is right on the slide. You can kind of follow along. I'm just going to do a quick coding demo of this nav bar. So yesterday I kind of left off on this page and we had the grid system and we had some cards, but inside of this, I'm going to, even above my container, I'm going to do the nav bar above my container. And because it's a nav bar, we're going to use the nav semantic tag. And the first two classes we talked about, nav bar and nav bar expand. Now you notice I'm not adding in a viewport or like a size. I'm just saying nav bar expand. And that's going to be, you'll see that's what's highlighted that kind of makes this a static nav bar, is just that piece right there. Navbar Dark, we kind of talked about this yesterday. That's going to be the font color on the nav bar. And we're saying we have a dark nav bar, so the font should be light. So by saying Navbar Dark, this actually creates a light font. So that's what that class does. And BG, background dark, actually sets the background color of a dark. Let's go ahead and have an anchor with a class of Navbar Brand. And so this talks about branding. A lot of times on Navbar, on the leftmost area, you might have a logo or just text. In this case, it's just going to be text. The purpose is branding and marketing, though. The purpose is getting your logo in front of people at the top left corner of the site. And so if you have a logo, you can we'll show what that could look like as far as the branding is concerned. In this demonstration, though, it's just text. As we've done in this class, our Navbar links are going to be in an unordered list. And the class is Navbar Nav. So this is the actual portion of navigation in your Navbar. All right, so the UL has a class of Navbar Nav. Our LIs have the class of Nav Item. And we'll also add the class of Active, and we'll see what that looks like, the class of Active on our LI. And then lots of classes on this. So on our LI, we've got Nav Item. But then on our anchor tag, we have class of Nav Link. And this is just going to say our home. Close the LI. We'll have another LI, class of Nav Item. Have an anchor tag, class of Nav Link. So Nav Item on the LIs, Nav Links on the anchor tags. Okay, we'll just put 2 links in our nav bar. And this is a nav bar in its most basic form. And so we don't really get any collapsing here. It's just a nav bar that stays the same, static in nature. We're not getting any sort of hamburger menu, if you will. So that's what it means by our static nav bar. So again, a lot of classes here. Navbar, Navbar expand, text color, Navbar color, background color, or I'm sorry, text color, text color. These are both text colors. Background color, Navbar brand. Where did that go? Navbar brand, sorry, I'm jumping back and forth here. Navbar brand goes on this anchor tag. Again, this is just the logo in the top left corner. You can kind of see what that does for the styling. It kind of makes it stick out compared to your normal links. Active, sometimes in your nav bar, when you're like on the home page, you want that link to be styled differently. In this case, it really didn't style anything differently, but that's the theory behind marking your LI as your active item. You might style that LI with a different background color to indicate that that's the page that you're on. And so that's the theory behind the active class. You could style that. Now, again, you're not really seeing that do anything here. Okay, so that's a simple Bootstrap Nav Bar. I like this example because it, even on the Get Bootstrap site, if you go to the docs and then you go to layout, to components, excuse me, nav bar. Like, look at this first nav bar example. So like what I demonstrated in class the other day was like, oh yeah, just go here, copy this code, put it in. You're getting way too much. And by the way, what does each one of these classes do? Who knows, right? What I like about this example is it's as broken down into the small pieces as you can get, as simple as a nav bar as you can get. And each class you can make sense of without getting a little bit too much. I typically, like some of these. I do like some of these lower examples. So for example, here's what a Navbar brand looks like with an image and a piece of text. So you could put your branding in an image, right, inside of your anchor tag. So what would we do here? So here's our anchor tag. You would put your image essentially right here. And this image has to be a small image, otherwise it's going to blow up your nav bar into some huge. So you'll notice they make it a HTML attributes, width and height. And they also throw some classes on this image to display inline block. We've talked about inline block one other time. Inline block is a display property that's a hybrid between display inline and display block. Right? You get a little bit of both. So it doesn't cause a line break because it's display inline, but you can set custom width and height because it's a block. So that's what display inline block does. And then it says align text top, so that's going to get the text to go kind of towards the top of the image or around the image, how it does. Okay, next example is a responsive nav bar. So it's not a static nav bar, it's responsive. So the first thing I'm going to do differently is I'm going to expand at the medium. So that's the main thing. We're saying, hey, you should be expanded medium devices and up, meaning small and extra small are in collapsed. We're going to have our Navbar brand just the same. I do not have an image in here, so I'm going to kind of remove my Navbar branding. Before my list, we have to put in our hamburger menu. Okay, now that hamburger menu is only going to be visible when it's collapsed. So this button that I'm going to type here, this is an HTML button. We're going to cover buttons in forms. So we have a chapter on HTML forms. We haven't covered that chapter yet, so you haven't seen this tag yet. Simple enough to say a button is a button. You can click it. It has, a lot of times you can tie in JavaScript that says when you click the button, do this thing. So you might have actually seen this in the Codecademy. When you did forms on Codecademy, you might have seen the button. The class, so button type of button is pretty standard stuff there. That's just regular old HTML. This class, Navbar Toggler, makes sense. It's toggling the nav bar between a hamburger menu and a static menu, right? Notice I'm still typing attributes of my button. This attribute is something used by the JavaScript. So the JavaScript that's built into that collapse plugin is looking for a button with this specific HTML attribute with this specific value. And so Here we're going to give this ID of Navbar 1. And that's going to be relevant as we continue to type this. So this is a target attribute, again, used by the JavaScript that says, hey, we're looking for something called Navbar 1. Area controls, area hyphen controls. We have to talk about this attribute. These are expanded. These area controls are attributes for accessibility purposes. To tell a person with vision impairment about the state of the nav bar, whether it's expanded or collapsed, etc. But these area attributes are, again, in short, they're for accessibility purposes. Okay, so this button, this hamburger menu, in short, we got two things going on here. We got some code that we wrote for the JavaScript that's relevant for the JavaScript to work properly, and there's some code for accessibility purposes. And that's this button. Again, this button's not going to show up all the time. And this span Navbar Toggler icon is where they're actually going to put Navbar Toggler icon. Thinking about a toggler icon. Let me think about what that's going to have in it. Let's inspect this when this goes live, because I'm thinking like that's more of a manual control, but I'm not sure. So we'll take a look at this. Now, what we need to do above the UL, so what have we added? We've added a button and we've added a span. And this span happens to be inside of the button. Okay, so this span's inside of the button. That's going to be the drop-down button. And it's not visible all the time. All that for the drop-down button. There's one more div that we're going to add that's a parent to our UL. Div ID of Navbar 1. So notice here, the area controls Navbar 1, this ID of Navbar 1. This links this div into this button, right? That ties the two things together. Basically says put this button in this div. So yeah, so they basically, these values have to match. Navbar 1, the ID of Navbar 1 is our target for this button. Class is Navbar collapse and collapse. Now this div opens as a parent of our UL and closes after the UL. So notice the nesting here. All of it inside of a nav tag. All right, so if done properly, there it goes. If I inspect this, let's break this out. Let's get it into iPhone view. So there's our button. Oh, the span is just for the 3 lines. That's just where they put the 3 lines icon, the actual icon. The button is the actual thing that you click. The span is just the 3 lines. So this button is put onto Navbar 1, which contains all of our links. So that's your basic Navbar. And again, I like this demonstration because even though it's a fair amount of code, right, in many cases it's going to be a lot less code than what you see on even on the documentation, right? And generally speaking, you know, you should be able to kind of go in here and make sense of it, right? You say, okay, well, this class of nav link, it makes sense that this is an anchor tag on our nav bar, so it's a nav link. That makes sense. What styling and what, you know, what does it actually do? You know, a lot of times you launch the page and look at it and inspect and figure that out. Yeah.
Hey, just got a quick question. So it's kind of a little bit off topic, but those attributes are those custom like JavaScript? Like the JavaScript put those into like are there?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So just like HTML can target things by their classes and their IDs, you can also in the JavaScript target things by their classes and IDs. So the question is, yes, are these classes relevant to the JavaScript? And the answer is yes, they are. If you don't type these, not only are these used for the CSS, but they're used for the JavaScript. And if you don't type them exactly how they're supposed to be typed, something will more than likely break. You know, because again, this feature that, you know, this hamburger menu is provided by the JavaScript. And if I just as a demonstration, if I kind of come into this script tag and I comment that out, all of a sudden it doesn't work. I can click my nav bar is not expanding, right? We still get some things here. There must be the CSS that's doing this, hiding and showing this content, right? So it's the CSS that's hiding and showing the different pieces, but it's the JavaScript that's getting the dropdown to work. Close that. So again, the brand, right? That's just what they call, you know, your branding. Companies want to push their brand. You as a student want to push your brand, right? Your name is a brand to potential employers, right? You want to brand yourself to potential employers with your name. If you want to make a logo, a certain theme for your branding, if you will. Like I had a student last year who went with because Cyberpunk was the new game and Cyberpunk's really flashy and colorful. And he wanted to do everything with Cyberpunk branding. And so he went out, his web portfolio was Cyberpunk branded, themed. He went out and got business cards made. He made his own custom logo, right? So at the job fair, he was not only hand out his resume, which had a cyberpunk looking theme to it, but business cards that had his brand to it. So you as an individual can brand yourself and sell yourself to employers. Okay, part of that is making a logo. I'm not an expert in branding as far as what makes a good logo, but if you've ever heard of Fiverr, could you hire a freelance logo developer overseas for $10 and make yourself a professional looking logo? The answer is yes. You could pay someone, doesn't even have to be a lot of money, to make a nice logo around your name and your initials, right? And you could put that logo of yourself in the brand of your website, of your resume, of your business cards, should you choose to go there, right? You can kind of see the way this is done. Now, what's interesting about this nav, they have a container inside here. As I demonstrated, I didn't put mine in a container. I didn't put my nav bar in a container. That's why it goes 100% width of the page. If I were to put my nav bar in the container, so let me just highlight my nav. I'm going to cut and put it in my container now. You might guess what it looks like, right? So now it's in the container. That's not the part here. And we actually showed this on the docs, right? Inside of the anchor tag, go ahead and put in an image. Tell that image to display inline block. What was ME2? Anyone remember what ME2 was? Yeah.
Be a margin right 2.
Margin right 2. Sounds correct. It was on margin on one of the sides because there was ME and MR.
It was S, maybe.
MS, thank you, yeah. So then your image source, again, give it a custom width and a height, and that's going to get the company name right up next to the brand. So that's adding an image. Again, this width and height's important, otherwise the image is going to probably be too big. Color schemes light, so background of light, nav bar of light, so those two typically match. Of course, BG dark, Navbar dark gets you the opposite. Contrasting text and color. Can you set your own custom colors? Yes, you can. You can. Someone did it in here. I want a red nav bar. Okay, well, take the BG light off and put, BG danger, and that's going to give you red. In fact, here it's Navbar Dark and BG of primary. So if you want to use these different background colors, I've always seen it be Navbar Dark. So you're going to say Navbar Dark and then just use one of the built-in classes for background color. And those are your nav bars, basic nav bars. All right, let's go ahead and pause. We'll take our first break this morning. We'll come back and we'll do another component. The next component is the Jumbotron. You see these on a lot of websites. The usefulness of these, is we're going to get into that. How are these useful? What is the Jumbotron? A lightweight, flexible component to showcase key marketing messages on your site. Buy me, shop now, subscribe, search for a song, post a picture. What is the intent of your site? What are you trying to do? What is the intent of the page? What is that page trying to do? That's often called a call to action. About the only place you see newspapers nowadays are in the gas stations, right? Do you really see newspapers anywhere else? Does anyone have the newspaper delivered? No, it's kind of, yeah, some people do, but not many. Yeah, you get it, you pay for it, but you don't read it. That's funny. Anyone that's ever worked in a newspaper, I happen to know a lady who worked in the newspaper. She's very versed in the newspaper world. And a very common concept is this above the fold. You can imagine what this was. This was your selling point to the general public. And I know everyone knows those old newspaper machines. You put in 50 cents, you get a newspaper. and you saw the headlines in the window of the machine. And those headlines were trying to grab they're the old school clickbait, right? The old school clickbait. They get your attention. Big picture, war in Iraq, whatever, high school catches fire, whatever's going to grab your attention. The concept of above the fold was to sell the newspaper above the fold so that you would generate the sale of the newspaper in the machine as best you could. That exists in the digital world on websites. Above the fold refers to above the scroll bar. So basically, when the website loads, what do you see before you scroll down? Anything that isn't visible immediately that requires scrolling is considered above the fold. So you're trying to sell the intent of your site before the user has to scroll, right? Google's results page, right? If your links aren't in the top 5 links and the top 3 links, the odds of a user scrolling down looking for the results really diminish, right? So studies have been proven to show that users, they want their information fast, and they want that without much effort. Okay, the scrolling in this case is the effort. If you're at the bottom of the results page, you're less likely to get clicked on versus the top of the page. Okay, that goes for all websites in general, let alone having to go to the second page of Google, right? Users are probably going to reform their question before they go to the second page of Google, right? And the old joke that comes to mind, where do you hide a dead body? Where do you hide a dead body? On the second page of a Google search. Right, because no one goes there, right? So okay, haha. Generally speaking, above the fold, 400 to 600 pixels from the top. You can use viewport height if needed, 400 to 600 pixels. Again, every page should have an intent. What is the intent of this page? Spotify's trying to get users to search for songs. Instagram's trying to get people to post pictures. Facebook is trying to get people to post status updates. Amazon's trying to get you to buy stuff. Every page on your site should have an intent, it should have a purpose, and you should be trying to convert your users into customers through this conversion funnel, right? People who use your site are converted by the call to action, right? The call to action is the big button that says buy now. The call to action is the big button that's got to search for a song or post a picture, right? So the call to action gets the user's attention. It piques their interest, attractive visuals, video content, quick summaries. A lot of times in the Jumbotron, this big area, you've got some like animation video that's things that are like moving in the background. You go to a website and it's real flashy and movie and you're like, oh my gosh, what is this? This is cool, Builds a relationship of trust and the desire to buy. It's not always to buy. Sometimes you're trying to get a user to search or to post or to call me now, right? Convert them into a customer. Give them an action to take. Purchase, subscribe to my newsletter, right? So I can make you a reoccurring customer. Subscribe to my services so I can charge you $15 a month. So again, what we're trying to do above the fold on our web pages, attention-grabbing headlines, content, and imagery above the fold, large fonts, background images, gradients. Again, sometimes you get some videos going on in the background. Animated graphics and video. Give a call to action. These are all important marketing concepts. And that's where the Jumbotron comes in, right? Jumbotron, big area, big text, background images, big buttons, click me, search me, buy me. You know, you can put your call to action in the Jumbotron. Let's code it up. Underneath the nav bar, we already have a container, so div class of Jumbotron. We'll give it a dark background and white text. So here's our Jumbotron. Big ol' H1. Class of Jumbotron title. So you can imagine that's a really big H1. Well, I'm going to show you what these display classes do. Display 4, display 3, you know, you can imagine they're going to mess with the font size and all that. So this is our button, our anchor that says buy now, right? We're going to style it as a button. Our anchor tag is styled as a button with 3 classes. BTN says make it look like a button. BTN primary gives it the color of blue. BTN large makes it big. That Jumbotron's not jumbo enough for me. But this is the idea. I would, you know, we can style this to make it bigger. Let's make this let's inspect it this way a little bit. And div class of Jumbotron. So that class of Jumbotron actually didn't do anything for me. Let me delete the class. You see, in the markup, I just deleted the class of Jumbotron. Let me refresh. I want to show you this. And the reason I'm showing this is because I think the Jumbotron as a component has fallen out of favor. And we've kind of talked about that in this class a little bit. Under components on the Bootstrap docs, under components, there used to be a Jumbotron right in here. Now you got to search for it, and now it's labeled under custom components. And this custom Jumbotron, what really makes this custom? Let's inspect this. Let's inspect this guy. They just added padding and margin. If I look at this, there's no more class of Jumbotron. It's just P5 and MB4. This is the class of display 5. Let's look at display 4. Display 4, display 3, making it bigger. Just like our H1s, H2s, display 2s, display 1, FW bold. You can imagine what FW bold does, font weight bold. Right, so you can see it's no longer bold because I deleted that class. By the way, when I'm deleting things on my inspect tool, I'm not changing the actual markup itself. I'm just, for that individual page, I'm changing that markup that one time. If I refresh the page, it just goes back to normal. So if I take my lessons here and I apply these lessons to my Jumbotron, let's add P5. It's class of rounded 3. So let's add some padding. I'm just going to add on my Jumbotron. I'm going to remove that Jumbotron. Do P5, MB3. Got a bigger Jumbotron. right? So no more class of Jumbotron. As again, as I mentioned, they kind of took that off. I think that might be a difference between version 5 and 5.1. Let's add, just because our rounded 3. Let's add this class of rounded 3 to our Jumbotron. I want to try that. So here's our rounded 3. Get some rounded corners on our Jumbotron. Remember CSS3 when we learned how to do rounded corners? Border radius, right? With Bootstrap, we've got, here's rounded 3 versus rounded 2. Rounded 1 looks like a little bit less. Rounded 5 doesn't look like it exists. Rounded 4 doesn't look like it exists. About rounded 3 is about as high as it goes. Again, display 4, display 3, display 2. See, it's getting bigger. Display 1, getting bigger. Font weight bold. So using these classes, I bet you if I can just delete the Jumbotron title now. See that Jumbotron title? No longer needed. All we did, added padding around the corners, make a big bold piece of text in the middle, make a big button that says buy now. You can make it bigger should you choose. A full width Jumbotron, just like our Nav Bar. How do you make our Nav Bar full width? You take it outside the container. You want a full width Jumbotron, you take it outside the container. So here's our container. So there's our nav. We'll put the nav and the Jumbotron outside of the container. Notice our container now starts on line 46, ends on line 82. Full width Jumbotron. Background image. Well, don't we know how to do background images? What do we really have here? We have a class that we can target. Let's throw a big image in the background. So our parent, let's give them an ID called Jumbo. I don't know that this is going to look any good, but I'm going to save this image. I'm just really... Let's save this to my web dev repos, my repos, Bootstrap, lab. I'll call this light.jpg. Background image, URL, images, light.jpg. Background repeat, no repeat. Let's do background position center, background size of cover. Background position center. Background size, cover. Got a nice big background image. Finding the right images will help you make better looking websites, right? If there's one piece of advice that I can give to help you make your sites look better, is find the right images. If there's two pieces of advice, find the right images and then find the right fonts. Images and fonts are a vast majority of what makes site really stand out and look good. Yes, sir.
Do they have free, like, say you're talking about using their website for logos, is there a website where they have free logo?
There are logo generators, but they're just okay. And you could Google those. I talked about some of the early memories I have of being a kid and writing HTML. One of the early memories I have is finding a free logo generator, and I would put my name in an animated GIF, and my name would be on fire.
Oh, like cool text.
Like cooltext.com, and exactly, like it was firetext.com and cool text. That's right. However you wanted.
I remember those days.
That's right.
I was about 14, 15.
Yeah.
Like, oh, great.
Exactly, right? So can you find free logo generators? Yes. Are they any decent? Probably not. So they're, I don't know, depending on what's out there. Maybe there's some decent free ones. Good question. What about min height 400 pixels? Let's throw this min height 400 pixels. Min height. I think I closed it. Okay, that made it taller. Again, good contrast. I mean, you got, generally speaking, dark background, light foreground, right? Vice versa. So this doesn't really work because this light kind of makes it hard to read, right? Because the background is dark, except for there's a light bulb on that stinking thing. So that makes that kind of hard to read. So either change out your background image, don't have a light thing in there, but okay, you get the idea.
Probably just edit it and like paint and then build it.
Yeah, there's other options. Display flex, let's see. You could add a shadow on it. Yeah, shadows aren't a bad idea. Let's try this. Let's tell that Jumbotron to display flex and make it a column, justify content center, and align item center. So there's our 4. So let's do that. Display flex. There's flex direction column, justify content center, align items center. You get your call to action right in the middle of the screen, right? That's kind of cool. I like that. Actually, that's what they do on this example. They put a font weight on it, which we've already done, and a text shadow, 2 pixel, 2 pixel black. So let's do text shadow, 2 pixel, 2 pixel horizontal, vertical, black. Get a little text shadow there. I've said it before, I'll just repeat myself. You could do shadows, but they need to be subtle shadows. I would say that's a good subtle shadow. And now the text is no longer on top of the light bulb. So what we're kind of doing here is interesting because we're taking kind of what's built into Bootstrap and we're starting to apply our own CSS knowledge to it. Let's see if there's anything. I don't think there's really anything. We've looked at this custom Jumbotron. I've shown this before, how you can inspect these elements, and you can boil down into here, and let's just say you want this Jumbotron, so you can kind of dig into here, and you can just right click and copy the HTML, copy the element, and you could see, you can dive into and see a little bit here, but the back, oh, what do we got here? Text white, background dark. We got P5, so some padding here. H100 changes the height 100%. So that's what that H100 class, you can drill down and see what that class does stylish-wise, what it does to the style. So hopefully you're seeing the importance of the inspect tool and how you can tinker with the inspect tool to learn and continue to learn how things work and the way they operate, right? All right. That's the end of the Jumbotron. Awesome stuff. We'll stop the recording here.